This British reggae band was sabotaged from within just as they broke the top 10. Stick to the final reveal to hear the lost original mix of Amigo that the industry tried to bury forever. Long before crowds sang along to a chorus that would one day echo across Europe, 3 teenagers were already being shaped by the pressure of inner-city Britain, absorbing rhythm as instinct rather than ambition. Anthony Brightly carried music in his blood through the legacy of his father, George Brightly's sound system, a roaming authority that taught him discipline long before success. Chris Hansen balanced the precision of an electrician's training with a restless hunger for reggae's pulse, while Desmond Mahoney learned timing not from sheet music, but from dance floors, where bodies taught him rhythm long before he ever sat behind drums. What would later be mythologized as a band was at first only a necessity to express frustration, faith, and identity in a city that rarely offered space for any of the 3. Their earliest incarnation emerged not from grand vision, but from youthful experimentation under a name borrowed from pop culture, fantasy, and teenage humor, playing wherever amplifiers could be plugged in and ears could be captured. Yet even then, their cohesion was unmistakable. They were not chasing novelty. They were honing something heavier, something rooted in lived experience. When Cledwyn Rogers and Leroy Ross Bailey joined the fold, the music deepened, carrying the weight of Rastafari conviction and communal observation. The group that would eventually be known as Black Slate had not yet named itself, but its purpose was already forming music as testimony, not escape. Before recordings, before contracts, their reputation spread through performance. Promoters learned quickly that these young men could hold stages with authority, and soon they were trusted to back Jamaican legends touring Britain. Sharing platforms with Dennis Brown, Ken Booth, and Owen Gray was not merely exposure. It was apprenticeship under fire. Each night refined their discipline, sharpened their sound, and confirmed that they belonged within reggae's lineage, even as British outsiders. By the time Keith Drummond entered as lead vocalist in 1976, the final piece locked into place. His voice did not simply ride the rhythm, it commanded it, piercing and resolute, carrying spiritual urgency that transformed competent musicians into something formidable. The name Black Slate was not chosen for aesthetics. It was declaration, a slate upon which truth would be written plainly, without ornament. Their early material reflected this intent, nowhere more clearly than in Styxman, a song born directly from an epidemic of robberies in their own neighborhood. This was not distant commentary, but immediate response, and audiences recognized its authenticity instantly. The track's success across Britain, the Netherlands, and Belgium was less a commercial surprise than a cultural affirmation. People heard themselves inside the music. With that single, Black Slate became voices for streets rarely afforded one. Success did not soften them. Instead, it propelled them deeper into purpose. Touring Europe in the late 1970s exposed them to audiences hungry for conscious reggae beyond Jamaica's shores. Venues in Germany and Finland responded with near religious intensity, particularly when the band performed Mind Your Motion, a song whose power lay not only in message but in restraint, balance, and instrumental mastery. It became an underground anthem without needing mainstream validation. At the same time, Black Slate's musicianship made them indispensable within Britain's lovers rock movement, where their precision-supported voices, such as Janet Kay, Jean Adebombo, and Carol Thompson, even as their own identity remained rooted firmly in roots reggae. By the time Ensign Records signed the band in 1980, Black Slate had already done the hard work. What followed was not a gamble, but an inevitability. Amigo did not arrive quietly. It announced itself with melody that lifted rather than shouted, lyrics that united rather than accused, and a rhythm section locked so tightly it felt immovable. Keith Drummond delivered what would become a once-in-a-lifetime vocal performance, blending warmth with conviction in a way that transcended genre. The song's ascent into the UK pop charts, peaking at number 9, was unprecedented for a roots-oriented British reggae band. When Black Slate stepped onto the stage of Top of the Pops in September 1980, It was not merely a performance, but a breach in cultural barriers that had long excluded reggae from mainstream British television. The album that followed carried the same title, but its success concealed an approaching storm. While Boom Boom reinforced their chart presence, the musical climate was shifting beneath their feet. Dancehall's rise brought new aesthetics, new rhythms, and new priorities, often leaving conscious roots bands stranded between relevance and integrity. Black Slate responded not by chasing trends, but by doubling down artistically. The dub album Ogima, its title a mirrored inversion of Amigo, was bold, experimental, and critically lauded, even as it failed to capture mass audiences. Subsequent releases throughout the early 1980s continued this pattern. Albums rich in message and musicianship, yet increasingly distant from commercial momentum. Behind the scenes, life pressed in. The members were no longer teenagers fueled solely by conviction. They were husbands, fathers, providers. Financial instability became impossible to ignore. In 1985, after years of resistance, they chose pragmatism over pride. The hiatus was framed as temporary, a pause to establish stability beyond music. Yet time has a way of stretching pauses into eras. Anthony Brightly transformed his inherited sound system legacy into Pure Silk Records, navigating the industry from the business side. Chris Hansen built a successful vinyl distribution enterprise. Desmond Mahoney became one of Britain's most sought-after session drummers. His influence felt across countless recordings, even when his name was absent from liner notes. Keith Drummond and Leroy Ross Bailey pursued solo paths, each carrying fragments of Black Slate's spirit forward. 19 years passed before reunion became reality. When Black Slate reconvened in 2014 to record Now and Then, the landscape had changed again, but their purpose had not. The absence of Keith Drummond was deeply felt, yet the music carried maturity earned through distance rather than erosion. New recordings followed, festival stages reopened, and audiences both old and newly converted rediscovered the band not as relics, but as survivors. Then, loss returned, final and irreversible. Keith Drummond's passing in September 2025 marked the end of an irreplaceable voice, a spiritual conduit whose presence had defined the band's golden era. Still, Black Slate did not dissolve into memory. With Ngarbin Creary stepping forward as frontman, carrying lineage both musical and familial, the band continued, not in imitation but in continuity. Their story, viewed in full, is not one of uninterrupted triumph, but of endurance shaped by faith, discipline, and refusal to compromise essence for momentary reward. They may never have eclipsed contemporaries like Aswad or Steel Pulse in commercial metrics, but metrics were never their measure of success. Black Slate carved space for British reggae to stand on equal footing with its Jamaican counterpart, proving that authenticity was not bound by geography. What remains is not simply a catalog of songs, but a testament to a generation that used music as resistance, reflection, and revelation. In an era when reggae in Britain was still finding its voice, Black Slate spoke clearly, even when the world was not listening closely. Their slate was never wiped clean. It was filled, line by line, with truth that continues to resonate long after the echoes of Amigo fade from radio waves into memory. Tell me if you think Black Slate deserved more mainstream success. Share your favorite deep cut from their catalog in the comments. Follow for more stories of bands that changed music but were erased by the industry.